absolutely wild as Vern Gagne's All-Star Wrestling goes coast to coast and continent to continent. The greatest wrestlers in the world.
He may be an apprentice carpenter, but I guarantee you he is a seasoned ring veteran.
I've been hit with bar stools, bar rags, barmaids.
I'm talking to you.
They're scared that Hulkamania's still running wild. Oh, yeah. I got a big fat wife and 9 kids at home, and I gotta feed them.
And take a look at Jesse the Body in real life.
Open your hand once if you would.
You want to see it?
This is absolutely unbelievable. Totally, completely out of control.
He's coming in over the top. Hey! Look out!
There it is. There's the open. Here are my hands. We are off to a better start this week than we were last week when I unplugged my microphone and my camera and my headphones and everything else. But this is AWA Unleashed. We are the preeminent #1 podcast dedicated to telling the stories and reliving the memories of the American Wrestling Association. My name is Chris Tubbs. This is episode number 99. 99, 2 years, 99 episodes, guys.
Wow.
52 weeks a year, 100. So out of 104 possible weeks, we've done 99 shows. That's pretty damn good.
Damn right it is. And pretty soon we will do a good one at some point, I would think. Oh, by the way, I again, looking at that show open as I always do, I noticed Jesse Ventura with the Christmas tree ornaments hanging, as earrings. Chupik's been known to do that too. He's hung some ornaments on his ears, but unfortunately that was in July with really no explanation whatsoever. So,
I never heard of Christmas in July?
Can't we blame Marty and Sean for that?
Who?
Oh, sorry. Damn it. I just cost us $1 million.
That's right. There you go again.
God. Well, we're off to a really good start here, guys. What is the gimmick, Mick? 15 minutes remaining?
15 minutes remaining. Elapsed time, 45 minutes. Yeah.
We're having fun, though, guys. We love the podcast. This is going to be a fun one in the sense that we're going to the AWA was known for certain things and violence and bleeding and some graphic nature. And that's kind of what we're going to cover today.
Yeah, we are. And what better way to get into the holiday spirit than to celebrate the best bleeders in the history of the
Well, red means green, right? Red and
there
green.
You go.
Exactly. I was just going to, great minds think alike, Chris.
Perfect. There you go. Yeah, this is going to be a good one. I know, Chris, you and I talked about the graphic nature of some of the photographs.
Yes.
So we just want to alert everybody to that.
Yeah, I'm going to put in all seriousness here, guys, I'm going to put the graphic, the scroll. So some of it may be unsuitable for some. So if you're a little bit squeamish or a little uncomfortable with things, we are going to put some of these pictures up. So just be advised that it is going to be up there. But this is number 99 about the best bleeders in AWA history. Before we get to that, we do want to thank everybody for supporting us through 99 episodes, almost 2 years. Subscribe, rate, review, because this is how we got some big things happening in 2024. Mick, you're going to talk about it at the very end of the program. But YouTube, Apple Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, Google, Amazon, wherever, whatever platform, rate, review, subscribe, because I'm going to send you guys a couple of things tomorrow to look over, and I think we're going to be able to get that finalized. We got some big things planned, and I know it's like one of these special big announcements, but I do think you guys are going to like it. Mick you'll tease it a little bit later on in the program, right?
2024 is going to be a good year. We got a lot of stuff, very creative, innovative, interactive.
Yes.
Stuff for the viewers and the listeners. So looking forward to that. Yeah, we'll touch on that towards the end of the show.
Let's see some blood.
God damn, dude. Wow.
Well,
This got dark and all right, Joe.
Hey, we're talking about bleeders. Let's see some bleeders. We've gotten all of the particulars out of the way, and yes, I too am excited for what's coming up in 2024. Let's see some of that juice flowing down somebody's face. Let's
Wow.
get some color going.
Yeah, that's gonna be cool, but show me some blood. Show me some blood.
That's what the episode's about. Let's see it. I want to get into it.
Okay.
Before we talk blood, we gotta do it again, Chris. Here we got away with it, or got away from it for a couple of weeks, but now we have another acknowledgement of a passing of an AWA alumni.
Yeah, Doug McLeod, who did some interviewing. He did some play-by-play commentary for the AWA. Not a ton of it, but he was around for probably a couple of years. He was a part of the Pro Wrestling USA team. Doug, longtime Minnesota Golden Gopher play-by-play commentator. Doug did a lot. And seeing the news of him passing away, it's just, well, you know what, Mick, the older we get, it's not going to slow down, my friend.
No, it certainly is not. And you and I were talking early on, Joe, about the number of AWA announcers that are left. And I think I'm still here, but it really is very sobering. And one thing about Doug McLeod, when he actually did the play-by-play when there was a Nick Bockwinkel babyface turn with Larry Zbyszko and Greg Gagne and the Nunchucks out in Atlantic City. And Doug did a hell of a job there. Great voice. And one of the great moments in AWA history will now be attached permanently to Doug McLeod. Yeah,
he had that that voice. It was like the old school radio voice that you would say. And it's not that he had it, but the first thing that pops to mind is that old, I guess they characterize like the pukey type of a voice. And again, I'm not calling Doug McLeod's voice pukey, but it was just over the top type of just top four, but it was so good. And he was able to deliver in his own style. So thank you, Doug, and rest in peace.
You bet.
All right, guys, let's no way to make the easy transition, but let's do it, Mick. There's the reputation and the perception of bleeding and blading. It's almost like it's taboo nowadays. So if you guys can just kind of walk me through the old school blading versus the new school way of getting juice, as they would say.
I think, first of all, Chris, to your point about being taboo, it's taboo in the WWE. It's certainly not taboo in AEW or, the various independents. It's almost over the top with AEW, with a John Moxley character. Back in the day, and Joe will attest to this, it was generally either in a blow-off match or a major feud, and there was a lot of blood, but it meant something. It wasn't just every week you saw blood on television or whatever. So when you bought a ticket to see the Crusher and Mad Dog Vachon go at it, for example, which is the first thing that came into my mind, or you saw, you were going to see Bobby Heenan, you knew that somewhere along the line there was going to be blood. At the AWA matches in Chicago, they would chant for blood at the Chicago Amphitheater as soon as the bell rang for the opening match. I mean, you could have, Spike Huber and Prince Pullins in the opening match, and we want blood. Is
that kind of what fans like the we want tables? Is that kind of what that used to be?
Absolutely.
Where it's like immediately, okay, this is what we came for.
It is the same, but it's different because nowadays it's like, this is part of the shtick. They're chanting, we want tables, almost from the outset. And, the guys are getting the shit kicked out of them in the middle of the ring with kendo sticks, and the fans are chanting for tables. Chicago was a pretty bloodthirsty audience. And I think that probably was the most bloodthirsty audience in the AWA, as I recall. But man, we saw our share of it here in the Twin Cities area, Joe, with, as I said, the Crusher and the Dog, and it meant something.
It goes hand in hand with the current style of wrestling, in that the bar has been raised so high that even bleeding in today's matches, or some of the extreme headshots, not in the WWE, of course, or tables, ladders, guys jumping off of balconies, whatever. It's lost its sort of wow factor. Now, granted, I'm an older person now, and I've been watching wrestling, and as a kid, when somebody bled, it was wow. But the cat's been let out of the bag, unfortunately. And Mick, your explanation, 100% spot on, that it meant something. It was done in a cage match. It was done to set up a new angle, a new feud, to really get people to buy those tickets. Nowadays, sadly, it's almost expected, again, outside of the WWE. And it just, I don't know, the whole industry has changed, obviously, for better or for worse. But we will be talking about the legends that we grew up watching. We're going to see the blood. We're going to see and explain what it meant for that angle to bleed in the old AWA.
So if I mention the name Eddy Mansfield, your reaction is what?
My reaction is that was one of two turning points in wrestling history in exposing the business to a mass audience. The other one, of course, was Vince McMahon, kind of letting the cat out of the bag because he wanted to save some tax dollars with the athletic commissions. Eddy Mansfield showing everybody how it's done, how the rabbit comes out of the hat, so to speak, in wrestling as far as blading is concerned. That did it. And as we're referencing that wrestling, or that blood in the business meant something back then, because people didn't know back then. They speculated, but there was so much of this stuff. Oh, they used blood capsules, this, that, the other thing. But there was no definitive, this is how it's done. And I remember back the first time, I would say to somebody, hey, you know what? Let me tell you, there's no blood capsule, but this is how they do it. People were like appalled. Oh, God, no. Nobody is going to take a razor blade to their forehead. That can't possibly be. Got to be blood capsules. Got to be ketchup. Whatever. Food coloring. But once Eddy Mansfield and Jim Wilson went on 2020, I believe, and showed how it was done, that's it. Cat's out of the bag, like you said, Joe.
And I was going to say for better or for worse, but it just the whole, it's for worse. It to me, it was just more fun speculating and guessing. To maybe use an analogy, it's sort of like now, today it's UFOs. It's like they don't exist. Well, if one actually came down and we met him, it's like, UFO. Yeah, I always knew UFOs were real, and it's no big deal. And again, that's probably extreme, but it's in the same vein. Why they did it, I don't know. I've watched on social media the exposing magicians, and to me, that what Mansfield did was that he exposed the magic that we were looking at. It went from how in the hell did they do that? Is that real? And questioning to, I've seen that before. It's no big deal. Sucks, but that's where we're at right now.
So we're going to cover some of the most memorable bleeders in the history of the AWA. But before we get to that, guys, I know that there are some individuals that are known for a lot of bleeding that weren't necessarily connected with the AWA. So I'm going to let you guys kind of go forward from this point. I've got the pictures, so you guys continue the conversation. And then I'll jump in kind of wherever I see fit. But I'm going to hand it off to you, Mick, because I know we've got a list of names that we want to start covering.
We do, and this is in the context of what happens to a guy's physical appearance if he uses the blade over and over again, hundreds, if not thousands of times over the years. And I know we got a couple of photographs, as you said, Chris, of non-AWA competitors that will illustrate just what we're talking about. So there you go. There's number one of the worst foreheads in the history of wrestling. I mean, my God, if that guy wasn't run over by a bus and then it backed up and did it again. That is the late King Curtis. He was notorious. Virtually every match he was in, at some point, he took the blade, and look at that. And yeah, I guess if that was my forehead, instead of wearing it as a badge of honor, I might have let my hair grow. But look at that show. Isn't that
Well, he went beyond the forehead. He went to the top of his head.
Isn't that something?
It's like I'm wondering if down low, if that would even bleed anymore, because there'd be so much scar tissue. But you can plainly see the marks on top. On top of his head is where and you know what? I will have to say maybe he didn't blade for those, and those were just part of legitimate chair shots. But who the hell knows? But yeah. Railroad tracks, and we're going to see a bunch of them. What I think of, remember the old Conjunction Junction from the Schoolhouse Rock? There was always a shot up above that showed all of the train tracks going in all of the directions. We're going to see Lionel train shit today.
We really are. We're going to see some moon landings, from just before the module lands. Let's get another picture up there, Chris, and we will take a look at. Talk about guys. Now, there you go. Abdullah the Butcher. And we kind of separated him from the AWA roster because Abdullah was only here a very short time. But again, look at the top of his head. Not only the forehead, Abdullah the Butcher, as was King Curtis, a notorious bleeder in wrestling. I know there was some controversy where he was in a match, and I believe it was his opponent that got hepatitis C as a result of Abby's blading.
Yes. Yeah. That's one of the last stories that I've heard about Abdullah is the hepatitis situation.
Isn't that something? And, Abdullah the Butcher, Chris, if you look at the top of his head, as Joe was saying, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, Abdullah would take a 25-cent piece, a quarter, or a 50-cent piece, and he would literally put it into one of those big scars, one of those deep grooves in his forehead, to the point where the coin disappeared. It was like he was a walking vending machine. And, Abdullah, notorious, as was King Curtis. And again, you get to the point, and I know this is for a lot of wrestlers, you don't even have to use the blade anymore. When you get to that point, if your fingernails are sharp enough, you don't need the blade. You've got all that scar tissue up top and all that flesh, and you just nick yourself, and there you go. You got Niagara Falls.
Yeah, saw Wahoo do that right after, about 3 days after juicing at the showboat in Vegas. Came right in, just went, and blood started coming out again. Wow. Just shook my head like I'm doing now. It's like, why in the hell? Oh, look at the Sheik. Look at that.
Oh my God. The original Sheik, Ed Farhat. Not only, this guy was a madman. He was a certified madman. He would do anything and everything to get the crowd riled up. Arguably one of the greatest heels in wrestling. But again, look at that forehead. Honest to God, my cat's scratching tower is in better shape than Sheik's forehead there. but year after year after year of blading, and like you said, Joe, maybe sometimes you don't even need to blade. You just do it hard way, and look at that forehead. That is, yeah.
Imagine, imagine what his wife or partner uh, coming home after the matches is like, "Oh, how's your day at work, hon? You're looking awfully. So, how was your day at work?"
Yeah, it was
Just wow.
not a pretty sight. And there we go. Now that's kind of a tame picture compared to what we've been showing. That is Captain Lou Albano.
Well, it looks like a
And-
pentagram on his forehead.
Yeah, actually, he did rent himself out as a tic-tac-toe board, in wrestling's off season. But Captain Lou got to the point where he just didn't hide it from anybody. He would blatantly take the blade out from underneath his wrist tape or wherever out of his trunks, and he would just go to town. He would just carve himself up like a Thanksgiving turkey in full view of everybody. And he's and you see the end result of that. Captain Lou, again, one of the great or not so great foreheads in wrestling history.
The fact that, like you had said, Mick, they'd take it out of their wristband or out of their trunks. There were times where they'd also get it from the referee.
Yes.
For whatever reason, not quite sure if they were afraid of something happening with it on their bodies, but there were multiple ways, but there's only one way to bleed. And that's literally taking a piece of a razor blade. No.
Yeah.
So it was it because I've heard stories where it would be in the wrist, the tape. The tape did guys put it in their mouth too? Like, did you hear those stories, or am I just talking goofy?
Yeah, I think basically what it was, Chris, when it was time to blade, they would either lift that first layer of tape off the wristband or their fingers. They had the blade right underneath the first layer of tape on their fingers. A lot of times, when the fans were starting to get smartened up to this, if a guy came to the ring with taped fingers, they knew right away there was going to be blood. It's a changing world. I've told the story before. Back in the day, wrestling fans used to literally walk up to the ring after a Bobby Heenan match with a program or a napkin or something and scrape the blood off the floor and then taste it, put it in their mouth to see if it was real blood.
Oh, gross.
Talk about barbaric. Yeah.
I mean, even if it wasn't real blood, the fact that they're scraping something off of the matte canvas that these guys have been running around on, sweating on, getting their dirt on, and I'm sure the mat covers were not washed before every event.
I mean, it's probably not the worst thing that those people have ever put in their mouth. So I guess that's, we look at it that way. I want to ask you guys about two feuds. Nick Bockwinkel, Kurt Hennig, and then maybe the bloodbath feud that I remember is the Midnight Rockers versus Buddy Rose and Doug Summers. Can you guys kind of walk me through maybe the significance of those in the later stages of the AWA, and then we'll get into some individuals?
Well, the cat had been let out of the bag by then, which is really interesting. It had been about 2-3 years into being let out of the bag. And the match I think you're referring to is that incredible Kurt Hennig and Nick Bockwinkel bloodbath, the 60-minute draw from the Showboat. One of the greatest matches in wrestling history, bar none. And they both bled like stuck pigs. The Rose and Summers Midnight Rockers feud, the bloodbath, Joe, you know this very well. The cage match just blew the roof off of everything. And even though it had been exposed, the fans were so wrapped up in the greatness of those two matches that they were hooked. They got pulled right in.
And what we both had referred to earlier about how it meant something, it still did mean something in both of these matches. the New Year's Eve, as I like to call it, 'cause that's when we aired it. The New Year's Eve match of Kurt versus Nick wasn't the actual start, much like the Rose and Summers, which I'll get into, and Rockers I'll get into in a second. The feuds had begun. These elevated it, and so these, in both matches, having the blood on there pushed the angles even further for revenge. In the case of Rose and Summers against the Rockers, they had their first match at Wrestle Rock, and that tag team bloodbath, every single one of them bled. Doug Summers, Sean and Marty, the three of them bled. Buddy Rose did not bleed in that first one, but there was so much of it, and they sold it so well that, to me, that became the hottest angle in tag team wrestling at that time. Certainly in the AWA, of course, NWA people and WWF people have their own takes on it, but it meant something. They did come back again and bleed in a cage match. Buddy Rose did bleed in that one, but they didn't go over the top. In between that, yeah, they had some back and forth, but they didn't bleed just for the sake of bleeding. It meant something, and it elevated both of those matches. Kurt. Mick, you said that Kurt and Nick Bockwinkel match, one of the greatest of all time. I concur. This tag team match, I'm going to put into that same category, that it was one of the best matches that I have seen. When I'm in the production truck and I'm on the edge of my seat watching it and having to remind myself, hey, you got to get the next graphic ready, Joe. And that did not happen often. In both of these cases, it did happen because they were that good. And there was a lot of color.
Did Vern ever bleed? Because I go back and I look at all these pictures, but I don't ever recall seeing a picture of Vern Gagne with any juice.
It's interesting that you say that. I never saw a picture of Vern with juice. I had heard that he might have bled once or twice. I don't know if that was hard way. I can't imagine that Vern bladed. If he did, it would be certainly a rarity. Vern didn't have to bleed. That was the first of all, he's the scientific wrestler. He didn't have to bleed. He was just, he was Vern Gagne. So he didn't need that to get over, the old red turns to green. Didn't need to apply to Vern. He was already there.
Yeah, Vern was the all-American boy, the baby face, the pretty boy, if you will. You're right, he didn't have to bleed. And in all of my years in the business, in my 39th year, I guess now, never seen a photo, never seen a video. And I've got scrapbooks, images from the scrapbooks of Vern Gagne's career. Greg did bleed, as we can see here. But you know what? I'm going to put that out as a challenge. If somebody can find a picture of Vern juiced, then please send it in. I've not seen it.
Okay. So, go ahead.
No. You go ahead, Chris.
Okay, because I've got a follow up on that. So if we're talking about Vern maybe not bleeding, do you guys know if anyone ever refused to bleed or blade, or it maybe somebody wanted to, if they wanted to bleed and they were told no? I mean, did you guys ever hear stories like that?
I didn't.
Okay.
And I would think, with old school AWA, if you're told you're gonna get color tonight, you go out and get color. You don't tell the boss you're not going to do that. There's some guys that just bled arbitrarily, and they would do it for match after match. Mitch Stowe comes to mind. I don't think anybody actually would go into Vern and say, hey, let me cut my forehead open tonight. I mean, they knew if it was a Crusher or a Mad Dog, It came with the territory. You knew
Okay.
this is what was expected of you, but I don't think anybody would refuse.
Okay,
if they
I
were
was
told.
okay. I was just thinking maybe if you guys heard something like a reunion, some sort of get together where maybe there was a story that somebody's talking about, so and so was afraid to do it, or so and so wanted to do it, but they were told no. So I was just kind of curious if maybe guys want to
refusing to bleed. I've never heard of a story in the AWA of that happening.
Okay.
Being turned down because he wanted to bleed. Yeah, that actually did happen a couple of times, because you had guys who, I hate to say that they enjoyed it, but that they thought that, okay, you know what, I'm going to juice tonight. So it wasn't that they went to Vern and said, hey, I want to juice tonight. It would be, hey, do you need me to? Because if you want me to, I'm ready to. But Vern would pull it back again because you didn't want to do it over and over again. You wanted it to mean something.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Well, now that we've kind of set the table of it, why don't we actually get into some of the names here, guys?
Sure.
Because I feel like this also setting the table is also a pretty important part of kind of giving context to this whole conversation.
You bet. Let's bring up some of those photographs and relive some of the memories of some of the guys that took the crimson mask, as they say in the business. We'll wait for Chris to get photograph number 1 loaded up and go from there. There you go. A guy that we are very familiar with, not so much for the AWA, although his run here was abbreviated. He had bloodbaths with the adorable Adrian Adonis, and Joe, you were there front and center, and that, of course, is Tommy Wildfire Rich.
Yeah, in fact, when I first saw the picture, Mick, I thought of you because I know you've commented several times about your favorite AWA special look that I did.
Yes.
Is a battle royal that featured Tommy Wildfire Rich, and he wore a white T-shirt with the dyed hair, and he was a literal crimson mess. And along those lines, one thing to keep in mind, a lot of the guys, not all, but a lot of the guys that bled were indeed bleach blondes.
Yes.
And why? Well, put red on white and then put red on, well, grayish. You're not going to have the same effect. And so dyeing your hair and juicing, having that blood in your hair, wearing a white T-shirt, it's going to pop a little bit more.
Yep,
So
you
keep
could
that
see
in-
it from section 212A in the balcony, and that was the intent.
Yes.
Another photo coming up now. Another man that was in the AWA for a relatively short time, but he bled consistently, and he had a feud with Mad Dog Vachon that was legendary in the All-Star Wrestling Network. That is Joe LeDuc. Joe was legendary for bleeding. I believe he took an axe, if I remember correctly. He took a literal axe to his own arm as an angle set up in the studio. I believe it was in Memphis. Joe didn't hesitate to bleed, and when he had that feud with the dog, it was something.
You know, in that picture, doesn't he look quite a bit like Mad Dog?
He does. He certainly.
Yeah,
does.
I had to do a double take. I'm like, is that? I mean, it looks a lot like Mad Dog.
You know, and if you look on Joe's stomach, his lower stomach there, look at that scar going down. And again, now I don't think that was intentional. I believe that Joe got hung up on a ring post or something. But this man was he was a walking sieve. He bled from every orifice in his body, and a legitimate tough guy in Joe LeDuc.
Yeah, and a big guy, the lumberjack, Big Joe LeDuc.
There you go.
Who do we have next, Chris?
Who's the next
Drum roll.
contestant on The Price is Right? Legendary superstar Billy Graham. And Joe, I know you were just a pup, but I was there for his legendary matches with Wahoo McDaniel. Superstar Graham was another guy throughout his career. he bled incessantly. And, again, look at that. Amazingly, you got the blonde hair, and the fans just ate it up. Not only in the AWA, but of course, when he went out east, would wrestle Bob Backlund or Bruno or what have you. When Superstar Graham bled, he bled. And if you look at the original movie, The Wrestler, put out by Vern Gagne back about 50 some years ago, Superstar Graham is front and center at the beginning of the movie, showing that he had been cut open by Wahoo McDaniel. And he said, "Look at me. I'm going to need stitches tonight." And how many times was that refrain used over and over again by the Superstar?
Yeah, actually, Superstar was not before my time, Mick. I do remember Superstar Billy Graham versus Wahoo McDaniel in an Indian strap match, as it was called back in the day.
Yep.
The funny thing, and I thought this at that time as well, strap match, bloody strap match. Hey, Wahoo. It was held on Easter Sunday, and I remember thinking how funny that was back in the day. But God,
wrestling had no boundaries whatsoever. There was no limitations. Like Road Warrior Hawk said, Christmas is just another day to beat people up.
Yeah.
There is Chief Wahoo McDaniel, and of course here in the AWA, not only his feuds with Superstar Billy Graham, but everybody he got into the ring with, literally, and had a feud with. Wahoo bled, and it wasn't just in our territory. It was all over the country, and Wahoo had one of those foreheads that, you pretty much a map of downtown Denver. You could follow it with your finger. But again, legendary tough guy. And that's interesting, too. When you think about a lot of the guys that bladed, they were legit tough guys, and they didn't give a shit. And after a while, they just didn't feel it anymore.
Well, you got to be tough, but you also have to be, in just my opinion, a little
nuts.
Yeah, I was going to say strange. Nuts fits as well. Stop and think about this, okay? You're taking, Jerry, you're taking a razor blade, a point of a razor blade, and running it across your forehead. That in itself. Probably why I never got into the ring, but these guys could do it. I give them credit and kudos for doing it. But at the same time, I got to say, you're flipping nuts.
Joe, I cry if I get a shaving nick, let alone taking, the point of a Gillette to my forehead. But let's bring that picture of Jerry up again, Chris, if we can. Jerry Blackwell. Again, you talk about tough guys. Jerry, of course, legendary in the AWA for his feuds with not only the Crusher, but Bruiser Brody, Mad Dog Vachon, on and on. And interestingly enough, we've talked about this before on this show. 1 week after the Eddy Mansfield television aired, with him exposing the business, there's Jerry in a cage match in Minneapolis, and he is facing the crowd, and he went into his trunks and pulled out the blade and blatantly cut himself in front of everybody who had now been smartened up. So everybody ringside was yelling, "He's got the razor blade, he's got the razor blade." But Jerry Blackwell, again, legendary tough guy.
Seen him bleed very many times, and he would come back into the locker room and just wipe it off and carry on like, hey, just part of the job.
Do you guys know, did anybody ever get paid extra to bleed, or were there any extra perks if you decided to go out and get color for your match?
Joe, you go ahead, and then I've got a thought about that.
Yeah, the extra perks were that you got paid extra to juice, to blade. And again, Chris, going back to what Mick and I were talking about earlier on, it's when it meant something. And so when a promoter came to the guys to say, hey, need color tonight, I'm sure some of the guys would say, okay, fine, no problem. but they also knew that they would get paid a few extra bucks to do it. It wouldn't be a lot, but it'd be enough to make it worthwhile. Some of the guys thought, oh, sweet, I get to juice and I'm making a few extra bucks. Those are the sick ones, or the nuts ones. I shouldn't say the sick ones. But yeah, the guys will get paid a few extra bucks to juice.
And Chris and Joe, I mean, at its bottom line, if you're in a blood feud with somebody, you're going to draw a big house. And if you are paid on a percentage of the house, these blood feuds would pay off in spades, and you didn't necessarily need a bonus to go in there and do it. It was just automatically built in, AKA, again, Crusher and Mad Dog Vachon.
Yep, you just knew. Here's the wrestlers. Okay, we're going to be getting color in this angle at some point.
Yep.
Okay. I was just kind of curious if that was something that was always floated out there. So I know we got a few more names we want to get to, guys, and I know this is somebody who did it quite a bit in all territories.
The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Back in the early 70s when he was here in the AWA area, and he was feuding with the likes of the Crusher. Big Dust, again, one of these guys that bled every night. And I don't know how many times, I couldn't even speculate. Think about this, Joe and Chris, over the years, not only in the AWA where basically it got started, but into Florida and then into New York and everywhere this guy wrestled. Dusty bladed night after night after night, and it wasn't always in front of a big crowd. It's just what Dusty did.
And one thing to keep in mind is that these guys would I was going to throw out a number, but let's say safely back in the day, these guys are wrestling 200 nights out of the year.
Minimum.
Yeah. And so just going on that 200 number for easy math, juiced maybe 150 times when they were in an angle that they were, even in small towns, they're building up to get that big house show, wherever it may be. But over 100 times per year, taking a razor blade onto your forehead to get color to sell tickets. And you know what? It worked pretty damn well for them.
It did. And of course, this is before all the talk about hepatitis C and about AIDS and whatnot. Nobody knew really back then. And so it was just part of a night at the office.
Yes, indeed. Let's move on to the next one. It's going to be a walk in the park.
Oh. Again, talk about a guy who bled consistently, but he did it against opponents, whereas we hammered this home over and over again. It meant something, whether or not it was against the Crusher or whether or not it was against Jerry Fatwell, whoever it might be. Mad Dog Vachon, one of the legendary bleeders in wrestling. And Mad Dog was another one of these guys, Joe. He had the scar tissue. He didn't need the blade. And there's another shot of Maurice back in the day. He didn't need the blade. He just barely touched himself sometimes. And it started to spurt. But Mad Dog, again, one of those guys, you knew you bought that ticket, you laid your money down, you were going to see red. And how can we forget the 26 stitches he got in his noggin when he went a little bit deep with the Crusher on All-Star Wrestling?
Well, it's not that Mad Dog went too deep himself. It's that when he was going to juice, Crusher hit him.
Yeah.
And pushed that blade in a little bit further. He literally cut into an artery. Did he not, Mick?
He did. He absolutely did. His forehead looked like a squirt gun. Roger Kent knew. Roger Kent knew how bad it was.
If you listen, and it is out there. I had used it on one of the classic AWA pay-per-views, that clip. You could hear the sense of emergency in Roger Kent. It's like, get your ass out here. This guy is in severe trouble. And Mad Dog was. I mean, and Crusher didn't know. Crusher kept attacking him. And, the fact that Mad Dog survived that, not that he was on death's door, But that was pretty damn dangerous.
It was, and that, of course, is natural segue into this guy. The legendary Reggie Lasowski, the Crusher. Crusher, who was still blading into his middle 50s and, still into the mid 1980s. He was still blading against Jerry Blackwell. The matches that Crusher and Bruiser had with Larry Hennig and Harley Race, for example. And then, of course, Nick Bockwinkel, Ray Stevens, on and on. And Crusher was one of those guys you just knew, especially in a cage match. Crusher was going to bleed. There was no question about it. It was just a matter of how far into the match Crusher was going to bleed. But when you talk about the all-time great bleeders in AWA history, Crusher is right up there.
How about that?
Incredible. And and these guys would come out the next time on television with a little Band-Aid over their forehead, where they might have had, 10, 12 stitches put in there before, the week before, and they would just come out with that badge of honor, that Band-Aid, and it became a hallmark of AWA wrestling back in the day.
Yeah, and as sick as it was on the Crusher and Mad Dog, I've again said it before on this podcast, my very first live event matches, the main event, Mad Dog Vachon versus the Crusher in a steel cage, and I became hooked. I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I'm seeing this blood from a distance, old St. Paul Auditorium, but I got hooked on a cage match because of Crusher and Mad Dog and the blood in there. It might be a little something touched up here, I think, too. Yes, I'm crazy, nuts, all of the above.
Well, now we've gone through a lot of them, and inevitably there's only one way to end this list, and it's I'm going to put the picture up there, and I don't think it's going to surprise anybody, but I think if there's one person that encapsulates the professional wrestling business, and we've talked about this individual over and over again, I feel like there's one name, one performer that goes on the very top of this. And I'm going to put this picture up first. I've got a second one. But, I mean, is it any doubt that that's who we're talking about?
Bobby the Brain Heenan. And if you look at that photograph, the blood is actually dripping from his forehead onto the mat. Bobby was one that was legendary. He just didn't take surface cuts. These were not hangnails that Bobby Heenan was slicing into. He bled consistently. And the thing of it is, Joe and Chris, that's what everybody paid to see. They hated this guy so much that as soon as he was signed against the Dog or Crusher or whoever it was, people were salivating to watch Bobby Heenan bleed. And he did it over and over again. He had that forehead full of scar tissue. And I mentioned before, one very serious wound he had right across his head. Had nothing to do with blading. It was the result of getting hit over the head by a claw hammer, the claw end of a hammer, wielded by a fan in Chicago. But when you talk about the legendary bleeders of the AWA, my God, I saw so many matches with Bobby and Dr. X where this guy, I mean, he literally looked like he was a lawn sprinkler. It was just incredible.
You hit it on the head earlier when you said that's what people came to see when they knew that Bobby was in a, whether it be a cage match or any type of special match, a handicap match or whatever. Everybody wanted to see Bobby bleed, and bleed he did, and he did it well. Look at that. That is a definition of a crimson mess, even though it's an older photo and looks like dried blood, but do the color correction, that's a crimson mess. And if you're sitting watching this or listening to this and you're thinking, the guys did it all the time and you're no big deal, stop and think. You're taking a small piece of a razor blade and running it across your forehead. the thought of even doing it. Mick, you said earlier, if you shave and you get a nick, you're calling in sick for the next 3 weeks.
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it.
That's it. If you ask anybody, you hand somebody a piece of a razor blade and say, okay, go across your forehead with this. How many people are going to be sick enough to do it? Not very many. And these guys, the legends, they did it consistently to entertain the wrestling fans.
And I'll go a step further. Go up to somebody with the gimmick and tell them, I'll give you $100 if you cut yourself like a professional wrestler. I'm going to bet that the majority, which technically is 6 out of 10, but 6 out of 10 people would easily say, not an effing chance in hell. And I'd be one of them.
You better believe it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap up the content version of our episode number 99. Again, about the best bleeders in the history of the AWA. Hopefully, you guys have enjoyed this episode. And again, if you're squeamish and you haven't seen the pictures, that's okay. If you feel like maybe, if you're listening and you want to go back and you want to take a look, just take a look at our YouTube. The video is live right now. So we're getting ready to wrap it up here, guys. Let's give a shout out. Do we want to give a shout out before we kind of preview what's coming up in 2024, or we want to preview 2024? How you guys want to do this?
Well, if I could interject before we even get into that, I think one thing we forgot to mention, happy holidays to everybody.
Absolutely.
Tis the season to be jolly. Tis a season to have a horrible green screen back.
I was just going to say, my God, it's the podcast version of the Team Challenge series.
Oh my God!
Very true. That's what you get when you don't have a legitimate green screen behind you.
Wow,
you're kind of floating in and out there, Chupik.
Give me some Tommy Jammer.
You got apparitions and ghosts and everything around you, and apparently you're getting ready for the Christmas tree up your ass match in the Team Challenge series.
It's a Joe Chupik on a Christmas tree match.
Wow.
But this is very similar to the original green screen that I had to work with the AWA, with Larry Land and with the Destruction Crew. This probably looks about as good as that did in the day. But
you deserve
I'm
a
not
medal
letting you
of honor.
go until you give me some Tommy Jammer. Come on, give me some Tommy Jammer.
Yeah, let's try to figure out where Tommy Jammer stops and the green screen starts as we're trying to do with that, whatever that is behind Chupik's head that keeps coming out of there like a Martian landing in his ear. As far as the shout out, guys, I know we all feel the same about this. The shout out, it's a universal shout out this week, not only at the holiday season, but going into 2024. For everybody who has made this podcast an unbelievable success. I never imagined 2 years in we would be doing this with an increasing fan base. We have a loyal viewership. They're always so great.
Yes.
And happy holidays, everybody. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
What he said. I haven't been a part of this podcast since the beginning. It's about a year now. I think it was in December of last year that I joined this podcast full time, and it was a Christmas present for me last year, Christmas present for me this year. For the fans, some may think it's like getting coal in the stocking, but you're stuck with Polish Joe, according to Barry Darso, the heel podcaster of AWA Unleashed. Not going to live that one down. In fact, I was directing a hockey game this weekend, and in between periods, the color commentator asked, I heard about, listened to the last podcast, and I heard about Darso calling you a heel. I got to hear that story. So, hey, talk about viral. I guess one way or the other. If I got to be the heel podcaster, Karch, I want you in the cage.
Well, you've been a virus of some type or other for many years, Joe. So this is nothing new.
Hey, can Wally Carbo thank our fans?
I want to thank everybody. Listen, the podcast itself, lots of. I got a fade worse to death for anybody who doesn't turn on the podcast. And see you later. So long, Wally, and thanks for the happy holidays.
Wow. I want to echo what you guys said. We've got a really loyal following, those that have been with us since the beginning, those that are just kind of, finding us along the way. Thank you guys for everything that you've done. It doesn't go unnoticed. And we've got some cool things planned for 2024. Again, keep an eye on our social media pages, on the AWA Unleashed Fans page on Facebook that, Brandon and Brian and Jeremy do an absolutely fantastic job in moderating that. It's been a blast, and I feel like we've done some good things, but we are on the edge, you guys. If you kind of want to get a little bit more involved, if you want some things that are going to be a little more personal, you want to get a few extra perks, we're working on those. And I feel like those that want to be a part of the podcast, they're going to get more of an opportunity to be more connected with us. And we're going to try and I feel like we're fan friendly, guys, but I want to offer more. And I feel like we're on the edge, and hopefully at the beginning of 2024 for episode 100, maybe we'll even let it know. We'll let everybody know about it beforehand. I'd even love to.
Chris and Joe, I got to say, the three of us, we have a good time here, amongst ourselves, but we love the fan interaction. We love the feedback. We love doing the live events wherever we can actually intermingle and talk with the people that watch the podcast. And as Chris said so very eloquently, we are going to do a lot more of that coming into 2024. Some big surprises. I think you're going to be very, very happy indeed. A lot of them, the brainstorm of our head honcho here, Chris Tubbs, who came up with some great ideas. So thank you, Chris, and it's going to be a fun 2024.
That it?
That is it.
You going to end with putting me over? What the hell?
Let me rethink this.
Oh, we could go on, Chris. We really could, but it is the holiday season, so happy ho-ho.
Okay. All right. I'm trying to end the recording, but if it doesn't end, then I will just I will end it manually. So we will end it after that. So that's all good. It's still recording, but I will edit it. It doesn't want to end.
Oh, you gotta leave this on.
Welcome to 2024, ladies and gentlemen.
Stop, we're done.
Happy 2027, everybody.
Maybe if I refresh it, it will end. It's the never-ending podcast. I'm going to go away. Hold on.